Kale, the ultimate cool weather green that's as nutritious as it is delicious. It's a cold weather crop for the most part, leading me to growing kale twice a year. Once in the spring, and then again in the fall. The timing is everything, and because of this, I do feel that kale is best grown from starter plants. They come in all shapes and sizes, so let's dive right in and explore the wonderful world of kale. Kale is a member of that expansive family of crops known as brassicas, meaning it's directly related to things such as broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. And as such, it has very similar growing requirements. Originally from the Eastern Mediterranean, kale has been cultivated for thousands of years. It's an annual plant, sort of, that's best grown from seed. It tolerates a wide range of temperatures, but tastes the best when it's harvested in cooler weather. The fall stuff tastes the best, but don't knock a good spring kale, which is what we're gonna do today. As mentioned, kale is best grown from starter plants to control not only the timing, but also to maximize your harvest window. Early spring, you can buy them for a couple bucks each. They're literally everywhere. I like to make my own, however, to have more of a say on the timing as well as the variety. This year, I'm growing dinosaur and red Russian kale. Let me walk you through the steps to growing your own starters right from seed. Kale, like most seeds germination, is dictated by three things: soil, heat, and moisture. Moisture initiates germination, heat controls the speed in which that happens, and the soil facilitates the whole thing. Pick a proper seeding mix, pre-moisten it from below, and we're ready to plant. Kale seeds can be sown right into almost any container, and if you're just doing a few, I plant them into the small containers directly. If you're growing more than a few, or you do multiple varieties like me, logistically the plug trays become more desirable. Either way, kale is planted quite shallow, about a ½ inch deep or even less. Make a depression in that seeding mix, pop the seed in the middle, and then cover it back up. Optimal temperature range for germination is 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. At those temps, the kale seeds are going to sprout in a week or less. About a week after germination, thin them to the strongest plant if multiple ones come up. Give them as much light as possible and take those temperatures down, probably to between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. At 2 weeks old, if you haven't already, remove all kale seedlings from any supplemental heat. All of this planting and germination should be happening about 4 to 6 weeks before your last spring frost. It's this timing that's going to allow us to plant fully formed, well-started kale plants that can take advantage of the fringe cold season. In many climates, direct sowing your kale in the spring doesn't allow for that growth in time, and you're harvesting in the midsummer heat, which is fine, but not ideal. Carrying on, our kale is progressing nicely. At around 4 weeks, we can pop out one of those plugs and see the annoyingly long stem extension. This often happens when you're accelerating kale sprouts. It's unavoidable, and it results in the relatively top-heavy plants toppling over. No big deal, but we do need to mention it for replanting, because the stem indeed can be buried. At this point, the plugs can go directly into the garden, but if you started your kale a little bit too early, or if you're having a crazy cold spring like we are, we're going to need to transition these guys into a little bit bigger pots first. No matter where you're planting, bury that plug right up to the joint where it meets the whorl of the main plant and the leaf stems. This will allow the plant to grow upright and keep those lower leaves off the ground. As we mentioned, if you chose the plug trays and your kale's outgrowing it and it's not yet ready to go outside, then it may be necessary to transition them into a larger pot. If so, choose a suitable container size. Not too big, but not too small. A 4-inch nursery pot works great. Using a nice organic potting mix, plant up those plugs. Because I'm doing so many kale, I do like to fill up my containers first, then soak them from below, and then pre-make those holes for the plugs. They go in so easy that way. But remember, if planting outside is imminent, you can definitely skip this step. You can start planting your kale outside right after your last spring frost. And while kale is a super hardy plant that can survive sub-zero temperatures, it must be hardened off first. Slowly acclimate your kale to the increased intensities of light, wind, and temperature swings over the course of a week or so to ensure the best transplanting success. It's amazing. Even on the most seemingly calm of days, there is infinitely more air motion, direct light, and temperature variation than there is indoors. Even after just 4 days of a few hours per day, you can see this red Russian kale has totally changed its leaf color and durability. Look at it compared to its indoor siblings from the same batch. Hardening off is definitely no joke. With our kale all hardened off, we can now plant. As you know, kale comes in all shapes and sizes, but even the compact varieties are going to need a foot or more of space to grow properly. Depth-wise, the root system is extensive, so allow for at least 14 inches of soil, even deeper for the larger varieties. I have an 8-foot bed here that's got a radish crop ready for harvest. I'll go ahead and do that and get it ready for our kale. This radish crop has been holding down the fort as a living producing cover plant. I find that when I leave raised beds dormant over the winter here, the rains and the snow just compact the soil down like crazy. That can't be good for the soil's productivity or my plants. So if I can grow a cover plant like radishes that also produces a viable crop, you better believe that I'm all over it. That's one thing about harvesting a root crop like radishes, it thoroughly destroys the soil ecosystem of your bed. No problem though. We're going to go ahead and sheet mulch and cover up that exposed layer of topsoil. Because the time is now and I want those kale roots to have access to that juicy soil below, we're going to go ahead and use one layer of thin craft paper. At 8 feet long and 2 feet wide, I should be able to stagger my kale nicely in a zigzag fashion for around 9 to 12 plants, nicely spaced. Normally, using the no-till style of gardening, I would simply plant these kale plants right on top of this craft paper, but my radish cover crop has done such a great job of preserving this soil, I think I'm going to have to dig these guys in. I really don't feel too bad digging into the soil in this case, as those radish taproots have fully churned and turned this bed every which way anyways. Dig a hole roughly the same size as your pot, maybe a little bit bigger, and then gently squeeze these guys out. Don't pull from the stem, just kind of work your way around the pot and they'll come out on their own. Plant your kale right up to the same depth as they are now, or if they've grown that annoyingly long stem, plant right up to that first whirl of leaves. Don't bury the main crown. That could kill the plant. If you need a little bit more soil to hold them upright, simply use some of that same potting mix that you used to put them into the pots in the first place. Pretty basic in terms of planting, no orientation or other special considerations required. Kale enjoys light like any other plant, but you can get away with partial shade with these guys, making them an ideal crop to fill in those hard to grow places. Mulch heavily with some straw, grass, shredded leaves, or a combination of all three, and then give it a good soaking. Your kale is on its way. I grow my kale as a cut and come again crop, meaning I harvest the outside leaves only, leaving the center of the plant to keep growing and keep producing all spring right into the summer. The heat of summer will induce flowering, And while those are also edible, a lot of gardeners are going to dig up their kale at this time in favor of another crop. I'll often let my kale keep growing right through the summer, and if cared for, it'll survive nicely right into the fall, allowing me to skip the fall planting altogether. That really turns kale from a low maintenance crop to a no maintenance crop. Buyer beware, however. Skipping that fall planting and just enjoying the older plants that seem to spring back to life come the autumn is very climate specific. Even without this continued abundance, kale is a spectacularly productive plant that leafy green lovers simply have to grow. We've covered the entire growth of kale from seed to plant to harvest, so let's go ahead and recap to maximize that retention. What can you say? Kale is awesome. And hey, if you have any other additional kale growing tips that you'd love to share, make sure to leave it in the comments down below. Also, if any of you are on Facebook, head on over and join our gardening group called Growing Better. The group has grown phenomenally fast, yet it will never lose its sense of community or its welcoming feel. If you're passionate about growing epic organic fruits, herbs, and veggies for you and your family, the Growing Better group is a great place to hang out, share, learn, and grow. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. If you're getting value in this and the other series that I'm doing on YouTube, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons if you'd be so kind, and I'll see you in the next video.